I was so shocked when I saw my ex standing at the altar with the woman he once told me not to worry about, especially when his best friend walked straight toward me and asked me to dance. I never thought a single envelope could drag me back into a storm I'd fought so hard to escape. It arrived on a quiet Wednesday morning, thin and white, with golden edges that shimmered under the sunlight sneaking through my kitchen window. The handwriting was instantly recognizable, strong, familiar, and painfully neat. Ethan and Claire, together forever. My heart sank. I stared at the letters as if they were carved out of my past, mocking me. Ethan was the man I once believed I'd spend my life with, the man whose promises had been written in whispers and broken without warning. I stood there frozen, fingers trembling around the paper, feeling old wounds I thought had healed begin to bleed again. For a long time, I just stared at it, the edges cutting faint lines into my palm. My mind replayed every memory I had buried. Our late-night talks, our shared dreams, the way he once said, "You're the only one I can see forever with." And now, that same man was marrying someone else. I thought about throwing it away. God, I wanted to. I walked to the trash bin twice, holding the invitation above it, my fingers twitching to let go. But something deep inside me refused. It wasn't love. It wasn't even curiosity. It was that aching need for closure, the kind you convince yourself you don't need until you're staring at the reason you never got it. Maybe I wanted to see if he looked happy. Maybe I wanted to see if I could stand there, heart steady, and finally feel nothing. Or perhaps I wanted to show him what he lost. Whatever the reason, a week later, I found myself dressing for his wedding. The venue was the same lakeside villa where he once told me he wanted to marry me. The irony was cruel. The moment I stepped out of the car, the scent of jasmine and champagne mixed with the crisp wind off the water, and the memories came rushing back. My heels clicked against the stone pathway as I walked past strangers smiling, unaware that I was walking straight into a battlefield disguised as a celebration. Every laugh, every shimmer of a champagne glass, felt like it belonged to someone else's world, a world I used to belong to. I caught sight of Ethan first. He looked almost the same, tall, confident, charming, but there was something colder about him now. Claire, his bride, stood beside him in lace and pearls, her smile wide and flawless. She was beautiful. I won't lie about that. She had the kind of beauty that photographs love, graceful, soft, untouched by pain. I'd seen her once before, when she was just a friend, the one who always lingered too close. Now she wore the dress meant for me. I felt a lump rise in my throat, but I swallowed it down. I wasn't there to break down. I was there to rise. People stared as I took a seat near the back. Maybe they remembered me from when Ethan and I were together. Maybe they just sensed the tension that hung around me like a secret. The ceremony began, and I tried to lose myself in the rhythm of it. The music, the vows, the gentle wind carrying laughter across the lake. But when Ethan looked at Claire with the same warmth he once reserved for me, it felt like a punch to the chest. I remembered the night he broke up with me, through a text message. "It's not you, it's just timing," he'd written. The timing, apparently, had improved once he met her. I looked away, blinking back the sting of tears I swore wouldn't fall. My reflection in the window showed a woman I barely recognized, composed, calm, beautiful even. But beneath that calm was a storm. I whispered to myself, "You came here to prove you've moved on." But deep down, I wasn't sure if I had. When the ceremony ended and the guests moved toward the reception hall, I slipped outside for air. The lake shimmered under the setting sun, 1,000 tiny reflections breaking across the water's surface. For a moment, I thought about leaving quietly, disappearing before anyone noticed. But fate had other plans. "Didn't expect to see you here." The voice was deep, steady, and startlingly familiar. I turned, and there he was, Daniel, Ethan's best friend. I hadn't seen him in years, but the moment I did, memories flickered. He was the quiet one, the one who always noticed the details others didn't. Back then, he used to smile at me in a way that made me wonder what he was thinking, though he never said much. Now he stood before me in a tailored suit, holding 2 glasses of champagne, his dark hair tousled by the wind. "Daniel," I said, trying to sound casual, though my voice came out softer than I intended. He smiled slightly, handing me a glass. "You look incredible," he said, his eyes meeting mine. There was no pity in them, just quiet admiration. I took the glass, forcing a small laugh. "Didn't expect to see you either," he chuckled. "Best man duties. Hard to escape." Then, after a pause, "But I'm glad you came." I tilted my head. "Are you?" He nodded, his smile fading into something more serious. "You deserve to be seen, not hidden away like a secret." The words hit me unexpectedly hard. For a moment, I didn't know how to respond. There was something about the way he said it, gentle, honest, that stripped away the armor I'd worn all day. We stood there for a while, the music from inside echoing faintly through the open doors. I sipped my drink, trying to focus on anything but the ache in my chest. "You know," I said quietly, "I almost didn't come." "I know," he replied. "Ethan said he wasn't sure if you'd show up." I let out a hollow laugh. "I'm not sure why I did." "Because you wanted to prove you could," Daniel said. "And you did. He noticed you, you know." I turned to him sharply. "I don't care if he did." He raised an eyebrow, that same teasing smirk I remembered flickering across his face. "Sure." I looked away, but I couldn't stop the small smile that tugged at my lips. It felt strange, smiling at someone during this of all nights. But Daniel had a way of grounding me. Around him, the noise in my head quieted just a little. As the evening deepened, more guests joined the outdoor terrace. Laughter floated through the air. The fairy lights above us flickered to life, casting a golden glow over everything. For a brief second, I imagined I was at a completely different wedding, one where I wasn't the ghost of someone's past. Daniel glanced at me again. "Do you ever think about starting over?" he asked suddenly. I blinked. "Starting over?" "Yeah," he said. "New people, new chances. Letting the past stay buried." I hesitated, my fingers tightening around my glass. "I used to think closure came from the people who hurt you," I said. "But maybe it just comes from deciding you're done hurting." He smiled, a slow, approving smile. "I think you've already decided." For the first time that night, I felt something shift inside me. Maybe it was relief. Maybe it was peace. Or perhaps it was the quiet understanding that life had a strange way of leading you back to people who saw you when no one else did. The music changed then, a soft, familiar tune drifting from the reception hall. Couples began to dance under the lights, the air filled with warmth and laughter. I watched them from the edge of the terrace, the shadows dancing across the water. Daniel looked at me again, his gaze steady. "Would you dance with me?" he asked softly. I froze, glancing toward the glass doors where Ethan and Claire swayed together, surrounded by cheers. "Daniel," I said carefully, "I don't think that's a good idea." He shrugged lightly, stepping closer, his voice low. "Then think of it as a goodbye to the past." The sincerity in his tone caught me off guard. For a heartbeat, I considered it. But I wasn't ready, not yet. So I smiled and said quietly, "Maybe later." He nodded, no disappointment in his expression, just understanding. "Then I'll wait." And somehow, that simple promise eased the ache in my chest more than any apology from Ethan ever could. When I finally left that night, I looked back one last time. Inside, the lights glowed bright, laughter spilled out, and Ethan's arm was still around Claire. But outside, under the quiet silver moon, Daniel's gaze followed me as I walked away. I didn't know it then, but that small moment, that simple look, would become the beginning of something I never expected. For now, though, I drove home with the window down, the cold wind brushing my face. The pain was still there, but lighter. I had faced what once broke me, and I didn't shatter. Maybe that was enough. Maybe that was the real closure I'd been searching for. The reception glowed with soft lights that shimmered like stars caught in glass, and laughter spilled through the air like champagne, bubbly, loud, and just slightly sour. I stood by the edge of the crowd, clutching my drink a little too tightly, watching Ethan and Claire move through the sea of guests like the perfect couple from a magazine spread. Their hands were intertwined, their smiles flawless, their laughter timed like a rehearsed performance. Every time their eyes met, I felt a twinge deep in my chest, a ghost of a feeling I no longer wanted to claim. People glanced at me, some out of curiosity, others out of disbelief, as if they couldn't quite process why I had come. But Daniel stayed by my side, his quiet confidence anchoring me amid the chaos. He seemed immune to the judgmental whispers, and I found comfort in that. He was effortlessly composed, leaning slightly toward me as he spoke. "You know, they're all pretending," he said softly, his voice cutting through the noise. "Half these people don't even like Ethan. They're just here for the free drinks." I laughed, an unexpected sound that surprised even me. "Maybe that's why I came too," I said, trying to match his calm sarcasm. He raised an eyebrow, amused. "You? No? You came to show him he didn't break you." I hesitated, my gaze drifting back to Ethan. He was smiling at Claire, brushing a stray curl from her face. That used to be my smile, my touch, my future. But Daniel's words pulled me back before the sadness could swallow me whole. I turned to him, forcing a playful smirk. "And what if I did come to prove something?" "Then you've already succeeded," he said simply, lifting his glass. His eyes caught mine, and for a moment, everything else, music, voices, even the ache in my chest, fell away. As the night deepened, the band shifted from upbeat tunes to something slower, something tender. Couples began to move toward the dance floor, drawn by the melody like moths to light. I took a small step back, instinctively avoiding the crowd. I had no intention of joining that sea of romance. But before I could escape, Daniel caught my hand. "Come on," he said with a grin. "One dance, for old time's sake." I shook my head immediately. "Daniel, this is his wedding." "Exactly," he said, his grin widening. "And that's why you should dance. You deserve to enjoy yourself as much as anyone else in this room." Before I could protest again, his fingers tightened around mine, warm and certain. He guided me gently toward the floor, his movements unhurried, confident. My heart pounded, not from fear, but from something else, something dangerously close to anticipation. The music swelled around us as his hand settled on my waist. His touch was firm but respectful, and when I looked up at him, there was no trace of pity in his expression. Only warmth. For the first time all evening, I wasn't thinking about Ethan or Claire or the life I lost. I was just here, in the moment, alive, breathing. "You know," Daniel murmured as we moved to the rhythm. "He was a fool." I looked up, caught off guard. "For what?" "For letting you go." I let out a soft, nervous laugh, the kind you use to deflect when the truth hits too close. "You don't mean that." He met my gaze steadily. "I do." He never understood what he had, but I did. The world seemed to slow. I could hear the faint rustle of Claire's dress somewhere behind me, the low hum of conversation, the gentle rhythm of the music. And yet, everything felt distant. Daniel's words hung in the air between us, fragile but powerful. I tried to focus on the steps, left, right, turn, but my thoughts were a mess. His hand was steady against my back, his breath brushing against my temple. My heart was racing, but not in the way it used to when I danced with Ethan. This was different, calmer, warmer, safer. When I dared to glance over Daniel's shoulder, I saw Ethan across the room. His eyes met mine for the briefest moment. He looked tense, his jaw tight, his smile fading as he watched me move with his best friend. For a fleeting second, I wondered if he felt the same sting I'd felt all those months ago when he told me he wasn't ready for marriage, only to get engaged to someone else. But instead of pain, I felt something unexpected. Peace. As the song reached its final notes, Daniel didn't let go right away. His gaze stayed locked on mine, searching, steady. "Lucy," he said softly, his voice low enough that only I could. "Here, I know this isn't the right time, but I've always wanted to tell you something." I blinked, my chest tightening. "What?" "I admired you," he said. "Even back then. You were the one with dreams, with courage. You pushed him to be better. You made him believe in more. He didn't deserve you, and I think you knew that even before he did." I stared at him, unsure how to respond. His honesty disarmed me. It was too much, too real. My throat tightened, but I forced a small smile. "You shouldn't say things like that. Not here." He shrugged slightly, eyes still soft. "Maybe. But truth doesn't care about timing." The music ended, replaced by applause and laughter. Couples drifted off the floor, and I took a small step back, needing air. Daniel let me go easily, his expression unreadable. I murmured something about getting fresh air, and he followed me outside without a word. The night air was cool, laced with the scent of the lake and blooming flowers. The fairy lights above cast a golden glow on the path as we walked to the terrace. The laughter from inside faded until only the crickets and distant music remained. I leaned against the railing, exhaling slowly. "This is surreal," I said quietly. "Being here, seeing him happy. I thought it would destroy me." "And does it?" Daniel asked, standing beside me, his hands in his pockets. I thought about it. "No," I admitted. "It hurts, but not in the way I expected. It's like watching an old movie you've already seen. You know how it ends, but you still feel something." Daniel smiled faintly. "You walking in tonight, it shook him. I saw it. He realized what he lost." I gave a small, sad laugh. "Then I guess I got what I came for." He turned to me, his eyes catching the warm glow of the lights. "And what was that?" "Closure," I said, though the word didn't feel complete. He shook his head gently. "No. You found something better." Before I could ask what he meant, he stepped closer. The air between us shifted, warmer, charged with something I couldn't name. His gaze softened as he reached up, his fingers brushing a strand of hair from my cheek. My breath caught. I should have stepped back, should have reminded him that this was wrong, that we were at his best friend's wedding. But the moment felt bigger than logic, raw, unfiltered, honest. He leaned in slowly, giving me every chance to stop him. But I didn't. I couldn't. His lips met mine gently. No hunger, no desperation, just quiet understanding. It was a kiss that spoke of forgiveness, not revenge. It didn't feel like betrayal. It felt like a release. When he pulled back, neither of us spoke. The night seemed to hum around us, the music inside fading into nothing but a whisper. For the first time in years, I didn't feel broken. I felt free. Daniel smiled softly, his voice barely above a whisper. "I think this was supposed to happen." I stared at him, my heart steady for once. "Maybe," I said, "or maybe it's just the universe reminding me that I survived." He nodded, his gaze lingering on mine. "Either way, you look like someone who finally let go." As I stood there beneath the golden lights, I realized he was right. The bitterness that had weighed on me for years had started to dissolve, replaced by something lighter, something that felt almost like hope. I glanced toward the hall where laughter still echoed faintly, where Ethan and Claire were probably dancing again, oblivious. But it didn't matter anymore. For the first time since the breakup, I didn't need his apology. I didn't need his validation. I didn't need him at all. I turned back to Daniel, smiling quietly. "Thank you," I said, For what? For reminding me that I'm still capable of feeling something real. He smiled in return, that same calm, grounded smile that had steadied me all night. "Anytime, Lucy," he said softly. "Anytime." And under the soft hum of the lights and the whisper of the lake breeze, I knew my story wasn't ending where I thought it would. It was only the beginning. The morning after the wedding felt like waking up from a dream I couldn't quite define. Half nightmare, half revelation. The sunlight streamed through my curtains, soft and golden, touching the glass of water I'd forgotten on the nightstand. My phone buzzed on the table, and for a brief moment, I ignored it. But the second buzz made me reach for it. A simple message flashed across the screen. "Can we talk?" My stomach tightened as soon as I saw the name. Ethan. The last person I expected to hear from, and the last person I wanted to. I stared at the words for a long moment, heart caught somewhere between satisfaction and disbelief. There was a time when a message from him would have sent me running, heart racing, hands trembling, desperate for any crumb of attention. But that version of me didn't exist anymore. I didn't reply. Instead, I tossed the phone aside and sank back into the pillows, staring at the ceiling. For the first time in a long while, I felt an odd sense of peace, as if some invisible knot inside me had finally loosened. I thought about the look on Ethan's face last night, the way his confident smile faltered the moment he saw me dancing with Daniel. The shock, the regret, the quiet jealousy he tried to hide behind polite laughter. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about getting even. It was about balance, about finally feeling like the one who had the power to walk away, not the one being left behind. Over the next few days, I expected the weight of that night to fade. But it didn't. Instead, it lingered, soft but steady, like a warm afterglow. Daniel texted me once that week, a simple message. "Hope you got home safe." Last night was something. I smiled at the screen, typing and erasing my reply 3 times before finally sending, "It was." It felt both strange and natural, like the start of a conversation that had been waiting years to happen. Weeks passed. Life returned to its rhythm, but something inside me had shifted. I started saying yes to small things I used to avoid. Coffee with coworkers, weekend markets, morning jogs by the lake. The world seemed lighter, brighter, as if some filter had lifted from my eyes. Every so often I'd think of Daniel, the way he'd looked at me under the fairy lights, the quiet understanding in his eyes, and my chest would tighten, not with pain, but with something tender. It was a Sunday afternoon when Daniel finally called. His voice was calm, casual, but there was a nervous edge beneath it. "I was thinking," he began, "we never really got to talk after that night. Would you want to grab dinner? No wedding music, no exes, no drama. Just dinner," I laughed softly. "You make it sound so simple." "It can be," he said, "if we let it." So I said yes. We met at a small restaurant tucked behind the marina, a quiet place with warm lighting and soft music. I wore a simple white dress and left my hair down. When I arrived, Daniel was already there, sitting by the window, the setting sun catching the edge of his jawline. He stood when he saw me, his eyes lighting up in that familiar, unassuming way that somehow made my heart stumble. Dinner was easy, effortless even. We talked about everything and nothing. I told him about the years after Ethan, how I'd spent so much time trying to rebuild myself that I forgot how to live. He listened, genuinely listened, his eyes never leaving mine. Then, almost shyly, he confessed how he used to get angry watching Ethan treat me like an afterthought. "I thought you deserved someone who saw you," he said quietly, swirling his drink. "Not someone who only saw himself." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. His words hit something deep inside me, a truth I'd never been brave enough to say out loud. I looked at him, really looked at him, and realized how different this felt. With Ethan, I was always performing, trying to be perfect, trying to earn love that should have come freely. With Daniel, I could simply exist. After dinner, we walked along the marina. The air smelled of salt and summer, and the city lights shimmered across the water. When he reached for my hand, it didn't feel rushed or forced. It felt right. I didn't know where it would lead, but for the first time in years, I wanted to find out. Months rolled by, and life began to bloom in quiet, unexpected ways. Daniel and I didn't define what we were at first. There were no labels, no declarations, just moments. Shared coffees, long walks, late-night laughter that filled the empty spaces of my apartment. He never tried to fix me. He just stood beside me while I learned how to fix myself. And maybe that was what love was supposed to be. Then, one afternoon, I saw Ethan again. It was completely unplanned. I was at a small cafe near the park reading a book when a shadow fell across my table. I looked up, and there he was, older, somehow smaller than I remembered. His eyes held the same blue I once adored, but the warmth was gone, replaced by a quiet hollowness. "Lucy," he said softly, as if saying my name hurt. "Ethan." My voice was calm, steady. He smiled awkwardly. "You seem happy." "I am," I said simply. He nodded, but his gaze dropped to the floor. I didn't mean for things to end the way they did. I thought I was doing the right thing back then. But I see now, I was just afraid. I listened, but I didn't feel anger. I didn't even feel the urge to make him understand. The fire that once burned for his apology had gone out long ago. I smiled, small and kind. "Ethan, you don't owe me anything. We both got what we deserved." He looked up, eyes searching mine, maybe hoping for a different reaction. But I was done giving him power. I finished my coffee, stood, and said, "Take care of yourself." As I walked away, the city noise swallowed the silence behind me. For the first time in years, I didn't look back. That evening, Daniel called. I told him what had happened, half expecting him to sound jealous or uncomfortable. Instead, he just said, "You okay?" "Yeah," I said softly. "I think I really am," he chuckled. "Then that's all that matters." There was a long pause, comfortable and quiet. Then he said almost teasingly, "So when are you letting me cook for you again?" I laughed, leaning back on my couch. "Tomorrow. But I'm bringing dessert." "Deal," he said. After that, everything felt easier. The past had finally stopped chasing me. The scars were still there, yes, but they'd become reminders, not wounds. A few months later, Daniel and I went back to the lake, the same one where Ethan's wedding had been. The villa was closed now, empty and silent, but the water was still as beautiful as I remembered. We sat by the shore, feet buried in the sand, the world quiet around us. "Funny?" I said, smiling faintly. "This place used to feel cursed, and now?" He asked. "Now it feels like a beginning." He reached over, brushing his thumb over my hand. "That's because it is." We stayed there until sunset, watching the sky turn shades of pink and gold. When he kissed me this time, it wasn't about healing or forgetting. It was about living. Life, I realized, has a strange sense of poetry. I went to that wedding to watch my past get married, but I walked away with something far greater. I walked away free, stronger, wiser, and no longer defined by the love that broke me. Ethan became a memory, a chapter I had finally closed. Daniel became something different, a promise I hadn't known I was waiting for. And me? I became the woman I was always meant to be. Sometimes the universe doesn't give you what you want. It gives you what you need. I thought I needed revenge, or closure, or an apology. But all I really needed was a moment to see myself again. And that moment didn't come from the man who once broke my heart. It came from the one who helped me remember it still beats. So yes, I attended my ex's wedding. I watched him marry someone else. But I also met the man who showed me that endings can become beginnings, and that sometimes the most beautiful love stories are the ones you never see coming.